Welcome back. We will now go ahead into our next scenario, which is going to be our async sync bridge without CCBPM, but here we will be using a ICO, integrated configuration. Sorry, I'll just update this while we are on this async sync bridge file RFC file, right? So this is a little more tricky than what we did in the classical configuration. So let's have a look at this. So what is an async sync bridge? An async sync bridge, as we discussed previously, is your ability to make a bridge where one system is asynchronous whereas the other system is synchronous. So we will still look at the file RFC file scenario. You have an asynchronous file adapter, which is a sender, which will make a call to a synchronous SAP system. You get the synchronous call and you execute the response mapping and pushing it out to the receiver. Unlike the previous scenario where the enterprise service repository was very straightforward, like a synchronous scenario, here it is much more complicated. You will now need to define 4 interfaces. The first interface is going to be asynchronous outbound service interface. The second interface is going to be, so the following 4 interfaces are needed. Asynchronous outbound interface request corresponding to the request message. Asynchronous inbound response interface, so this will contain the response message type. The number 3 is the synchronous service interface. In our case it will be the RFC, and then you will have the 4th, which is the asynchronous outbound response interface from the receiver. So this will contain the RFC's response structure. So do not worry, we will go ahead, build it, and as we build it you will be able to understand this, right? So we'll first look at the enterprise service repository and start building the enterprise service repository. So I'm going to close all, and I'm now going to create a new namespace. Call the namespace http training.com async sync bridge let's call it _ICO / file RFC file _00. Okay, so we'll say namespace for file RFC file for async sync bridge using ICO. Alright, so my namespace has been created. So we'll use the same concept. Let's just create a data type. I'll rather copy the data type. So let's right click, copy object. Let's rather create that. It will make it easier. So let's create the data type. I go to interface objects, data type. I say DT async sync bridge _ICO file request _00, right? And insert sub element, let's say user ID, and type XSD string. All right, so this is my request data type. Let's minimize this. Next I'm going to create my response data type. So DT async sync bridge ICO file response. All right, now I'm going to create 3 insert sub element. First name, last name. Sorry, I'll just move this down. First name, last name, middle name. All right, and here I'm going to call it XSD string and XSD string. Next, go into properties. I say 0 to 1. I say 0 to 1. And I'm going to say properties 0 to 1. So with this my data type has been created. Now let's go ahead and create our message type. So I'm going here, I'm saying message type. I say empty _async sync bridge _ICO file request _00. All right, and I'm gonna now make sure I drag my request structure here, and my message type has been created. Now I'm going to create my new response message type. So empty I've just copied the name. I'm just going to change it from request to response, create, drag my data type here and put it here. Alright, now let's go ahead and create our service interface. Now this is where there are going to, it's a little more tricky, so let's refer back. The first service interface that we are going to create is asynchronous for your sending system, right? So let's go ahead, go to interface object, SIOA async sync bridge underscore ICO and say file request underscore create. Alright, now so it's going to be outbound asynchronous and it's my request, and so I drag my request message here. Oops, I drag my request message and drop it here, and my service interface has been created. So the next service interface is asynchronous for my response structure. Okay, so the second service interface is going to be the one that comes inbound. It's asynchronous inbound and it contains the response structure. Alright, so with that, let's go ahead and create the next service interface, which is going to be our so I go here. Sometimes my right click doesn't work. SIIA async sync bridge underscore ICA underscore file response underscore 00. So it's going to be inbound, it's going to be asynchronous, and I'm going to drag my response message type. See, if you see, I've dragged my response message type and I'm putting my response message type. Alright, so I have an outbound and an inbound service interface. The next service interface that we need to create is for the receiving system. The number 3 service interface is our synchronous inbound interface to the receiver. In this case, we don't need to create anything because it's going to be our inbound interface is our BAPI. So let's not create anything there. The fourth service interface is going to be asynchronous outbound interface from the receiver, and this should be based on the response. So what does that mean? Let's do that. So I'm going to create a new service interface, SIOA async sync bridge underscore ICO underscore BAPI response. Oh, my bad, cancel. I'll just copy this. I press the enter key too fast. Right click, say service interface new. So it's outbound asynchronous BAPI response underscore 00. I'll say create. So it's going to be outbound. Again, it's going to be asynchronous. And here now I'm going to go into my imported object, select BAPI user get detail, drag him here and just select the response. So now we get the response message back. Alright, so with that we have created 4 service interface. Obviously your BAPI will continue to act as your service interface. One for the file request, and outbound asynchronous for the file request, when inbound asynchronous for the file response, and an outbound asynchronous for the BAPI response. With that, let's go ahead and create 2 mappings. Alright, we'll first create the first mapping objects. I'm going to call this underscore async sync bridge underscore ICO underscore file request to BAPI request. Alright, I'm going to map my file request to my BAPI request. So my file request is here, my BAPI request. I go to BAPI user get detail and say BAPI user get detail. Alright, and then map the username to the username and save my mapping. As always, let's test this mapping. Alright, so I'm going to call the username again admin, execute the mapping. My mapping got executed. Let's go into source and push this into a notepad. Alright, I'm going to call this file to underscore ICO.xml. It's async sync bridge file RFC file underscore ICO.xml, and I'll save it. Alright, the request message has been saved. Now let's create our response message mapping. Okay, my message mapping is underscore async sync bridge underscore ICO underscore BAPI response underscore to underscore file response. Right, it is now for the BAPI to file response. Right, now my source structure is going to be BAPI user get detail response. Alright, and my request structure is going to be again target, no sorry, it's going to be message type and file response. Okay, with that I'll drag my first name, I'll drag my last name, and I'll drag my middle name. Alright, so my response mappings are done. Next we'll be creating our operation mapping. So let's go ahead, right click, alright, sorry, here, go ahead, operation mapping, OM async sync underscore ICO underscore file RFC. Okay, so let's actually async sync. This is going to be from file request to underscore BAPI request. Alright, we're just going to map the file request to the BAPI request. So the source service interface is going to be the file request service interface, SIOA async bridge file request. Drag this and then say BAPI user get detail and drag it here and say read operation. Now if you see, because one side is asynchronous and the other side is synchronous, PI does not give you the request and the response. PI knows that this is an asynchronous call. So I select it, I get my mapping, and I'm done. Okay, so this line is done. My asynchronous message mapping gets triggered, it will make a call to the synchronous receiver. Now I need to build one more mapping, operation mapping. Alright, say click new, operation mapping, OM underscore async sync underscore ICO underscore BAPI response underscore to underscore file response. Okay, underscore 00. Alright, now my source message type is going to be, source service interface is going to be my SIOA BAPI response, and my target is going to be the file response here. Perfect. Read operations, select my message mapping, and my mapping displayed here. Apply, save. With this, our integrated enterprise service repository work is done. So let's go ahead and activate our changes. I'm activating my changes. I'll wait for the changes. There are quite a few objects in this, so it might take some time. We might have some warnings. Perfect. The change list got activated. Alright. With this, our enterprise service repository work is done. So we created one data type for the file request, one data type for the file response, one message type for the file request, one message type for the file response, three service interfaces, one for the file and one outbound asynchronous for the file request, one outbound asynchronous for the file, inbound asynchronous for the file response, and one outbound asynchronous for the BAPI response. This is very important. It is only for the BAPI response, and then our BAPI user get detail will act as our inbound synchronous service interface. Then two mappings, one for the file request to the BAPI request, one for the file response to the BAPI response, and likewise two operation mapping. With this, let's go ahead with to our integration directory and start our configuration. Right, so I'm going to go ahead, as always, create a folder. So first I'll close all objects. Alright, I'll copy this. I'll say folder, create. Alright, I'll just give the same name and I'll just say underscore ICO, right? So my async sync bridge underscore ICO file RFC file is done. So now we're going to create a sender file adapter. So I'm going to go here, business component. Sorry, I'm going to go to communication channel. I'll say BC file system 00 CC async sync bridge, and let's call it ICO underscore file underscore sender underscore 00. All right, give that here in the this is my sender file adapter, so I'll select the file adapter as my sender file adapter, and then out here in my integration directory, the directory is going to be, where's perfect. So this is my directory for my sender file adapter, and my file name is going to be what we just saved. Alright, I'm going to make sure that the mode is delete. My sender file adapter will pick up the file and delete the file. The next is going to be to create one receiver file adapter again. So So BC file system 00 CC async, and here again I will call it as underscore ICO underscore file underscore 00. Alright, and now I go into here, I say file, apply. Alright, now let me just get the path for the receiver file adapter, because we've already created it. I'm just going to async sync bridge. Okay, so this is the path, async sync bridge. Okay, so oops, I did a mistake again. So training, async sync bridge, control Y. Okay, I'm not able to copy it, so let's just copy it from here, then type that out. Okay, training, async sync bridge backslash, I'll say ICO backslash create directory, and I'll call it underscore ICO underscore resp underscore dot XML. Alright. Oh, there's a mistake. Is this a receiver file adapter or a sender file adapter? It is a receiver file adapter. I have not selected that. So now I've selected that, and I'll then again type the receiver file name, async sync bridge underscore ICO underscore file resp underscore dot XML. Processing, I will say add timestamp and advanced, and save it. Okay, with this our sender file adapter is done, our receiver file adapter has been created. Okay, we need a receiver RFC adapter, so but we will use the receiver RFC adapter that we just created in our previous session. The same RFC adapter will get reused. We need not recreate a receiver RFC adapter. Before we go ahead, let's look at what are the two ICOs, what are the ICOs that we need to build. Right, there are two ICOs that we need to build here. The first ICO is going to make the call. Sorry, here I'll have to say okay, there are two ICOs that we need to build. The first ICO is going to be the file to RFC ICO, and the second ICO is going to be the RFC to file ICO. And now in our RFC adapter we would need to add some modules. We would need to add the request response bean and the response one-way bean, and the parameters will be a little different than what we saw. So previously what we did was, in the classical configuration in the previous session, we had introduced all the modules in the center file adapter. In this case we are now going to introduce it in the receiver file adapter, and because we're going to introduce it in the receiver file adapter, we unfortunately cannot reuse the receiver adapter, but we'll have to create a new receiver RFC adapter. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to CC async sync bridge RFC receiver adapter. I'm going to copy it and call it underscore ICO. I'm just copying my receiver RFC adapter and putting it into the right folder again. Okay, so training 00, I'll just put it into this folder and say apply and say copy. Alright, so with this, now I have a receiver RFC adapter where I can now introduce the modules that I want to introduce. And then after we introduce, so we'll create two ICOs. And we'll introduce the module chain. So let's go ahead and introduce the module chains first in the receiver RFC adapter. So I go into the edit mode. This is the copied RFC adapter. I go into the edit mode, and now you see there is RFC bean that is there. So let's go ahead and introduce the modules. So I'm going to type the module AF underscore modules slash request response bean. Alright, the type is going to be local enterprise bean, and I'm going to call it REQ, or let's call it the complete name, request response bean. And let's move this up. This is the first module, request response bean, and the last module is response one-way bean. So RFC A bean, and let's click yes, and let's AF underscore, again type AF underscore modules backslash response one-way bean. Alright, okay, the W is small, this is a lowercase w, local enterprise bean, and let's call it response one-way bean and save. Alright, so now for the request response bean, it's going to ask whether the pass through, we will say yes, pass through, and say true. So now what's going to happen, The request response bean is going to have a asynchronous request, and it's now going to convert it into a synchronous call. Once the RFC gets executed, now the response is going to come, and here now we can't directly push it to a receiver file adapter. We now need to add some modules here. So response one-way bean, we need to add 3 modules: interface name, interface namespace. So if you see interface name, replace interface. All right. So we say interface name and replace interface. And we now need to give the interface name of the new interface that we created, right? So this outbound asynchronous, the BAPI response service interface, that interface is what is the new interface name that we are going to have, because that's where the new ICO is going to get triggered. Interface name, interface namespace. All right, so interface is going to contain the, okay, I've done a mistake here. I'll have to say interface namespace. All right, this is my namespace, and I'll say true. Let's make sure there's no space anywhere. All right, so with that, our configuration, our receiver RFC adapter configuration is done. Now let's go ahead and create our first ICO. All right, so I'm going to integrate, but before we go ahead and create the ICO, because we are using a file system, because we're using a business component, we need to manually add the service interface. So let's add the outbound service interfaces. The first outbound service interface that we are going to add is the SIOA file request. All right, I'll type that. I'll use my selection help. I got this. Perfect. Next service interface that I'm going to search for is the BAPI response, SIOA BAPI response. I'm going to select, yeah, perfect. And then my receiver service interface, which is inbound asynchronous file response, right? And here I'm going to go into inbound tab or the receiver tab, select, apply. Okay, looks like when I did a copy paste, yeah, perfect. There was some other issue there. SIOA, why does it have the same BAPI response twice? Okay, I did an incorrect copy paste. So I'm going to go here, file request, and put the file request here, and I'll save it. Let's use the selection help. Okay, so file request, BAPI response, and file response. With that, my business component is also ready. Let's go ahead and create the integrated configuration. Right, so I go into my integrated configuration. I'll say, hey, my sending system is BC file system 00. My sender interface is my file request. My file request is coming in first. Yes. My receiver system, my sender file adapter, my sender communication channel is my sender file adapter. Okay, next my receiver system is EH5 CLNT 800, which is my SAP system. In your case it will be something else depending on what your SAP system is. Select the operation mapping. It's the BAPI, it's the file request to the BAPI request operation mapping. Then I go into the outbound processing tab and I will select my RFC adapter. Be very sure that you're selecting the RFC adapter that where we added the modules. So this is the adapter where we added the async sync bridge with the ICO where we added the modules. Alright, with that the first ICO is done. Now let's go ahead and create the second ICO. Now in the second ICO, what are we going to do? We are saying EH5 CLNT 800 is the sending system. Alright, and let's search for this interface, BAPI response. Okay, go. Okay, let's just put that name here directly, BAPI response, and I'll just copy this here. I'll put the name here and say go ahead, create. So EH5 is the sending system because that's the guy who's triggering the response back. And now, very importantly, this is one step that you've got to be very, very clear here. Before you say create, select sender user virtual receiver and select your receiving system, which is BC file system 00. So what you're telling, EH5 client 800 is sending me the BAPI response. Make sure you select sender user's virtual receiver because it's a virtual system, and you say BC file system 00 is my receiver, and say create. And now with that, select the sender channel. Your sender channel can be any sender channel. So what you can do is there's an existing sender channel, SOAP sender response from RFC. So in this case, there's one more sender channel that we need to create. Let's go ahead. I'm going to create a sender channel. For this, I say EH5 client 800, say right click, new communication channel, so rather here. This is something I missed, sorry. So I have to create a communication channel under EH5 CLNT 800 and say CC Async sync bridge ICO and call it SOAP sender 00. It can be anything, but now for now I'm saying SOAP because it is the easiest thing to configure. So I'm saying SOAP, say apply, and direction as sender. With that, close this. Okay. So now I should be able to see my SOAP sender 00 here, async sync bridge, and apply it. Now my receiver is BC file system 00. So I select my receiver. It's going to ask me for a mapping. This is the BAPI response to the file response. I go into the outbound processing and I select my receiver file adapter, which is BC async sync bridge ICO file receiver 00. Alright, this is why the naming convention becomes very important. That way you know which channel you're selecting. Say apply and then save. With this, your configuration is done. Now before we go ahead, let's just upload the file into the directory. Here we go. So I'm going to call this as, my file was called underscore ICO. Okay, just say underscore ICO here and underscore ICO here and upload. Yes, please allow my file to be transferred. My file is now there. I'm now going to go ahead and activate my change. Okay, my change has gotten activated. Now let's go into AL11. Alright, I'll go up one folder. Alright, my file is here. Let's refresh. The file is gone. Now let's go into async sync bridge. Refresh, refresh. Something's gone wrong. So let's have a look at it. Okay. So now I'm going to close all sessions. I'm going to communication channel monitor. First, let's take it one step at a time. We are now first going to look at our file sender channel and see what happened there, right? Okay, so the file sender channel is perfect. There's no problem in the file sender channel. Okay, so there's some issue. You see the message status is waiting. So let's have a look at that. Okay, it's delivered to the RFC adapter. The RFC adapter has done its work. The RFC adapter, okay, no sender agreement defined that matches sender server's EH5. Did I not enter the right, select the right RFC? It says it is, the interface is wrong. It has not replaced the interface. So let's look at that. I should have told, if I go into my outbound, replace interface true. So ideally it should have replaced this interface with this new name and have done that work. But here if you look at it, it has not replaced the interface, and that's why it is looking for an ICO that has this information. Response one-way bean. Let's look if the response one-way bean got executed successfully. RFC adapter, response one-way bean, yeah. Resuming the transaction and sending a message. So the response one-way bean has not done its work. So let's look at the configuration. response one-way bean module. Yeah. Okay, let's have a look if the response one-way bean has been typed correctly. Interface namespace and replace interface. Interface namespace and replace interface. So this is right. And let's see if the channel that got called, what was the communication channel that triggered it? Okay, async sync bridge RFC receiver 00. So this is all right, and it's come to the module. The RFC module has gotten executed. It has made the synchronous call, and now it's come to local EJB the AF underscore module response one-way bean, and response one-way bean says, hey, I don't know what to do because my interface has not been replaced. Why has my interface not been replaced? The only thing I can think of is, let me have a look at the configuration here and make sure that the typing is right. Response one-way bean, that's okay. So one another thing that could be a case was, let's go here, RFC receiver 00. I'm just going to make this as smaller ones. It could be a naming issues, so I'm going to call it REQ and request and response. Save it. Alright, all my parameters are gone, that's okay. So I'm just going to say request as, alright, what's happened? Why am I not allowed to type? Okay, no worries. Pass through true. Right, next I say response, perfect. In my response I'm going to say interface name, and I'll say replace interface. Right, interface name and replace interface. And here I'm going to give the name of my interface to be replaced. It's going to be, yeah, perfect. So this is the name of my interface. Wait a second, it should be interface namespace. Yeah, I have a feeling the parameters in the screenshot are wrong, and that could be it. So we'll have to do a quick search. Give me a second, let me just type this. Interface namespace is this and true. Okay, I have a feeling these parameters are incorrect, so I'll quickly check that and be back. Okay, I'm back. There seems to be a bug with this module parameter in the current version that we are on. So the other alternate is, rather than using these parameters, if you look at the error that we are getting, it complains that, hey, I'm looking for a service interface, BAP user get detail, and you are an IDOC, right? So let's go ahead and just tweak this a little. Instead of creating, let's go ahead, delete this integrated, rather let's just go ahead, yeah, let's delete this integrated configuration and delete. Okay, and I'm now going to create a new integrated configuration, and I'm going to say EH5 is the sending system. I'll say BAP user get detail. Alright, I don't see that here, so I'm just going to go ahead, copy. I'll say BAP user get detail. URN SAP functions, RFC functions, sender users virtual receiver. Make sure you select this BC file system 00 and say create. Alright, and now I say file async ICO SOAP sender. Yeah, perfect. Receiver is BC underscore file system underscore 00. Alright, and now I go into my receiver interfaces. My mapping will not be displayed because I've done this. So for now, let's just go ahead and put dump the response that we get. So I'm going to go here and select the response here. Alright, no mapping, just select the service interface. Whatever is the mapping from, whatever is the response from SAP is just going to get into the file. And once I'm done with that, I'm selecting my file adapter, ICO file receiver. I apply and I save. Alright, now with that, let's go ahead to my change list, activate my changes. And now that my changes have been activated, let's go ahead and just restart these messages that had failed. I'll say resend. Okay, and I'm hoping now that this issue should have gone. It says delivering. Unfortunately, there are some issues where the bug, and now you see it's delivered. And now if I go into the directory, I refresh, my ICO directory is here and the response is here. The only difference is because we didn't have a response mapping, instead of our custom structure, the response that came out is here. We can obviously go ahead and create the custom mapping here, but then for now, let's just leave it at that. So with this, we've come to the end of this session as well, where we built an async sync scenario with using an integrated configuration. And to summarize, what did we do in this async sync scenario? We'll go back. We built a sender outbound asynchronous service interface that has the file request. We built an inbound service interface that has a file response, the BAPI service interface, and here this one was not needed. This was something that we learned because that's the bug. So we can use the BAPI user get detail. The same service interface can be used for line 3 and line 4. For line 3 and line 4, this is not needed. I'm just going to delete. We'll just use the same thing that we had here for line 3 for line 4, and that is exactly what we did. And once we did that, we built our enterprise service repository content, and in the integration directory you need to be very careful. Make sure you selected the sender uses the virtual receiver, and in the receiver RFC adapter you introduce these module chains. These parameters typically should have worked, but there is a bug on this PI server, the version that we are on, that needs a patching. So as a result of that, I've used a workaround by just using directly the BAPI name as the response structure. Alright, so with this we come to end of this session where we looked at the async sync bridge for an integrated configuration. We will now go into the next session. In the next session, what we will look at is building a sync async bridge, which is also a little more complicated. We will look at building a sync async bridge, and how do we set the correlation. So I shall meet you there in the next session. Thank you. Bye bye.